So here's some drums I recorded a little while ago that that I used for a bit of a show and tell on the Lusterious plates from Slate that I really like to use. So what you are hearing here is just basically my drum kit in my room. I have 57, just an SM57 on the top of the snare, a Lewitt DM, I think it's a DM110 on the bottom snare. The kick is just a D12, 112 on the kick inside, pointed at the beater. The toms, there's no toms in this section at the moment, so they would usually be the Audix D series, the D2 and the D4, I believe. Now the room is actually my Rode NTK valve mic, so set back approximately 3 meters away from the drums, and the overhead left and right are my Lewitt LCT 240s. So just so you know, so it's just, this is just straight dry drums. And here's this awesome mic on its own, which is the Rode room mic. There's the pre section there, so I've added some saturation, so you can see here. I've high passed at 70. I've low passed at around 8K there. Okay, and at the end of the pre, you can add a little bit of thump, a little bit of body, 2 dB. So if I hit 4 dB, so anyone with a subwoofer set up in their listening environment will hear that. I'm definitely hearing it here. Okay, so that's the pre side of things. So I just added some saturation. With the gate, as I've said before, I just bring the threshold up till it starts grabbing. I've added some floor, which is the noise floor amount. So any of the sound that's being gated, you can bring it back up into the what's being heard again. This is the amount of close, so you can go from big to small. Then you've got the attack, so I've got a fast attack and a medium release there, just to let it ring a little bit more. So pulling that back a little bit, you can actually hear that it's brought back a little bit of that noise floor in there. So if you take that out, so hear the difference. So there it is, you can hear it back. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a kick happening there. Let's move on now. Because we're dealing with a kick drum, there's no need to DS. So in the EQ section, as I said before, you may not have seen it because the plugin wasn't shown. Notice it's not orange. It's because if you don't touch anything, it won't unbypass. That's a really cool thing. I really like that because it just goes to show that, you know, unless you want it, you put it in. So in other words, you go for, so as I said in my case here, which is the kick drum at 80 hertz. So what you've got is the tone section of the EQ here. By the way, a lot of people apparently don't realize, but if you click on this square icon up the top here, you can actually get the whole view of the plugin there. I don't know why, but that was the first thing I clicked on when I saw it. And as I said before, if you hadn't seen the plugin before, you can change the order of things. So in other words, a very popular thing to do is compression into EQ, or EQ into compression, that kind of thing. But it's usually, I leave it the way it is. So in kick drum land, as I said, the 80 hertz is where my kick drum loves it. So we'll start at the bottom here. So I'm going to choose 80 hertz, and I usually go up about 3 dB. So you can hear it opening up the bottom end a little bit. So you can really hear it there. Okay, so that's at 80. So the ever popular thing is to drop around the 350 mark there. Now, as you can see, as soon as I hover over it there, it's preset on 350, which is excellent, because that means I can just grab the gain here and take some of that ugliness out of it. Off. So you can hear it's got that basketball kind of thing happening. So take that off. And there it is. So usually I take that out quite a lot there. Okay, so that's how I do it there. So I take the low and boost the 80 mark. That's where my bass drum seems to love it. I've taken the tone section here and I've dropped the 350 mark, which is the ugliness. And for the click of the bass drum, sometimes depending, this has got quite a bit of click to it already. I usually add some high around the 5K mark to give a little bit of point to the bass drum. So this is what would happen if I did that. But what that does too is it brings that basketball element back in. So there you go. So I'm just going to add a couple of dB to that because we can. So again, in the final, not again, but just so you know that if you don't touch anything, it won't come on. So you can see, even though it's bypassed or nothing's been changed, it's still doing something to the sound there. So I normally just don't turn it on then play. I play and it turns it on automatically. So I'm a big optical compressor fan. So again, I'm just going, being a kick drum, I'm going to add a lot of attack. Medium in the middle of release there. Leave the ratio the way it is. I think it's set on, yeah, 3:5. Okay, so a lot of attack, a lot of release, or half release, and then just dial it in. So that's with it off. So you can hear there's a little bit of that gate. So this is exactly how I'm doing stuff these days. So I'm adding some heavy saturation, high passing. Everything is in perfect from left to right, the way I love to work. This is exactly the way I used to do it with all different plugins anyway. Just that I would have to have, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plugins on the one, in the one insert on the track. So yeah, if you know or have the plugin, or you don't have the plugin, you may or may not know that there is this insert section here. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to bring in other Waves plugins as an insert inside the Scheps Omni channel, which I find very, very cool and have been experimenting a lot with this stuff. So again, you know, you can place it and you can add any of the plugins. So the thing I've been doing lately is using another Andrew Scheps plugin called Parallel Particles. What I like to call, since I've been using it, it is an attitude changer. It gives some character and some somewhat beef, especially this kick drum now. So the basic controls are the input, and it's actually linked to the output. So if you turn the input up a little bit, you'll actually see the output be turned down, just so it keeps the unity gain level the same. So what we do is I would start with the thick and the bite. So the way I would think about this is I would think about how much thump is coming through, so that setting we had before, it's boosting that in my kick drum for me. So what we would do is we would add some thick, some bite, which to me is the transient and the attack of the actual kick drum itself. And then we'll play with the sub, so how much bottom end you want to come through, which is frequency selectable. So as you can see there, it's everything from 32, I think, up to, oh, look at that, 80. Everything about this plugin is easy for me because they're the numbers I'm used to working with. So I high passed it down there at 70, and so that's where I'm going to set my sub setting there. And then there's some air. Air is obvious. It's adding some nice toppy, I guess you could call it air to the sound. So without any further ado, this is a little bit weird for me. So here's the kick drum. I'm just going to take the Scheps particle out. Now you can see this plugin lights up at the bottom to show the input. So that's the first thing I would normally do, is that just grabbing the input of that plugin there. You can see it's sort of going greeny. Yeah, so it's going to yellow, which is coming up to almost clipping. So if we bring that level up, you'll start to see some red come into it. Okay, so it's a little bit too hot. So let's just give it a 1 dB input there. So let me just show you and then I'll explain. So I'll just do it and you can hear the results. It's very, very cool, by the way. So you can hear some bite coming into it there. Okay, gonna add some sub to that. And finally some air. So if we take all that yumminess off, this is what we had previously. That is a mile of difference. Back in. So bypass the parallel particles. So you can still tell that, you know, the Omni channel is doing quite a lot to that kick drum. Put the particle back in again. So as a final result, we've got the output stage here. I would usually limit that. This is just the way I do things, guys. Please don't take this as this is should be. I just usually limit it at -3 dB. Check the output again. And maybe give it a boost at the input stage there. So now we have a really, really cool, big, fat kick drum sound. So depending on what you're doing, you could actually use the Scheps particle plugin to shape the overall sound character that you're after. If you want a big, fat, airy kick drum, you can dial that in just with the Scheps parallel particles in line with the Omni channel. So let's just move on to snare now. So this is with the kick drum. So as you can hear, the snare has got a lot of hi-hat bleed in it. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to drag in another instance of Omni channel. And again, depending on what you're doing, have a listen to the character of each one of these: odd, even, and heavy saturation. I'm using heavy a lot, so I'm just going to add some of that straight away. Now with your high pass, obviously we can high pass that a lot higher. Normally with a snare drum like the Superphonic that I'm using, I'd high pass that all the way up to 150. So you can hear that makes a drastic difference to the snare sound itself. We don't have any need for thump there. The gate, so as I said before, if you don't touch anything it won't turn on, but as soon as I hit the gate threshold or any of the other ones, so let's use the gate now and you'll see it come on as soon as I start adjusting it. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't ever worry about that bleed of the hi-hats. Some people hate it and they want a clean thing. I really like how it's a very much a Roger Taylor thing too in Queen. He opens, involuntary apparently, opens it up every time he hits the snare and it makes this kind of noise. So you can hear the snare and the hi-hat opening up together. So again, I'm changing the attack to a nice quick attack, leaving the release the way it is. And let's have a listen now. So you can hear it, the gate just works. It really does, and it's very, very quick. So I'm just going to skip the de-esser, go into the EQ, and I'm going to take out some of that yucky 350. Okay, and then with the mids there, see with that 350 on the snare drum, you don't want to take too much out of that because the character of the sound's there. So we'll add a bit of mids there. This time we'll use the FET compressor with a quick attack. So what we want to do is use the floor on the gate here and bring in some of that body back. So there we go, we got a nice, it's a little bit punchy now. A lot of that has to do with the compressor as well. So I'm going to lower that threshold on that compressor a bit. And again, let's add some awesomeness with the particles. So this is a little bit different now because we're not going to really use the sub. So I'm going to bypass that. And let's just add some more thump to that snare, shall we? Snap. So you can automatically hear that the Scheps particle has brought out a lot of that noise floor in there. So what I might do is go back here and turn that all the way down so we're not getting that. So we're going to add some air, some tops to that snare. Without. Still sounds pretty cool. With. A lot more snappy, a lot more snarey. Bypassed. So maybe a little too hot there, which it is. I can see it coming in. So let's just have a look at what the plugin's doing here. So yeah, it's coming in too hot, so we're going to lower that. So there we go, guys. That was a little bit on how I use the Scheps Omni channel. If you guys haven't already checked it out, get a demo of it, try it out. I think it's really, really cool.